Okay, everyone. Hello, this is Misha Houston. I want to thank everyone for coming to my channel and welcome to our live stream. I want to first apologize for not being able to broadcast this yesterday as per our normal time, but the truth is I just fell completely asleep and forgot that I even had a live stream. So we're putting one up Friday instead of Thursday, and I hope you all enjoy what you hear tonight. Um, would you all like to introduce yourselves? Give your intros.
Hey y'all, Jen here. Really excited to do this chapter. Always fun to do a Tyrion. Shelly?
I'm Shelly. I'm the bad one of the group. And yeah, I'm just hanging out and talking about Game of Thrones.
We got Alicia Kingston and Shayna Septa Sapphires in our chat. Hey girls, what's up?
Hey ladies.
Tony, you wanna do your intro?
Yeah, it's Tony here, Tony Umber. Glad to be here another week. Talking about Tyrion. And Tyrion is one of my favorite characters from the story to have a POV. I think the things he has to say are really he's got good wit to him and he's very knowledgeable. Where we don't get a lot of some of the the more lordly type people or don't seem as book smart and well read as Tyrion. So it's pretty neat to get that perspective from a POV character, other than like a maester or somebody that actually that's their thing is to be bookish. But yeah, I'm very psyched for Tyrion.
Yeah, it's your night tonight, and rather, the chapter is about Tyrion and his journey up north, to the wall. And Tony, this is your chapter. You told me that you did an outline, so if you want to go ahead and start it, and it's on you, bro.
Okay. Yeah, I just basically took it from the synopsis or whatever from the I think it was Westeros.org, one of them. But and then I'll go through some other stuff. But it starts off with Tyrion and Jon and Benjen Stark. Tyrion decides he wants to go to the wall. I guess he's already had this decision made when he came to Winterfell, and or actually when he was at Winterfell, I guess. So when he finds out, Jon and Benjen comes down for the feast or whatever when the king comes, and he finds out, Benjen's going back up, and Jon's gonna join him for the Night's Watch, and Tyrion is the only one out of pretty much everybody to really tell Jon what he's getting into. Like Benjen tries to tell Jon, you don't know what you're giving up, blah blah blah, but that's not really letting Jon know. Like Jon hears, all these stories about, times of the past where it was like the gallant thing to, give up your titles and lands or, becoming taking yourself out of secession, to actually get anything in your life, dude, when it comes to land and a wife and having kids of your own. And he thinks it's of a time from the past, and Tyrion's the only one that's honest with him. And in the beginning, Jon's just thinking, he's being Tyrion Lannister. But then in the end, we get to the point where Jon says, you're the only one that told me the truth about this place. But that's a little ahead of ourselves. But we get to where it says, after a fortnight riding north from Winterfell with Benjen Stark, Jon Snow, and two of his own Lannister retainers, Tyrion is amazed by the enormous size of the north. Although he knows the maps of the region as well as anyone, the land itself is quite another thing. It has grown colder, quieter, and far lonelier the farther north they go, and the King's Road has narrowed to a wild track. 3 days out of Winterfell, the farmland has given way to the dense, dark forest of the Wolfswood. There they meet up with Yorn, a brother of the Night's Watch, accompanied by two peasant boys condemned to join the Watch. And Yorn's they call it a traveling crow. He's one of the people that goes around from, like hold fast to hold fast and keeps castles and sees if any of the lords are willing to give up anybody that they have in their dungeons, and it goes into the towns, asks anybody wants to, volunteer to join the watch, so on and so on. But that night, Tyrion notices Jon Snow looking at their new companions with dismay and feels sorry for the boy who has had such a hard life chosen for him. Tyrion feels less sympathy for Benjen Stark, who apparently shares his brother's distaste for Lannisters and seems intent on making Tyrion's journey north as uncomfortable as possible. However, Tyrion does take a small bit of revenge when he accepts a tattered old bearskin cloak from Benjen, a gift Tyrion thinks Benjen did not expect him to accept and is probably regretting it. And what they're referring to is Benjen Stark, tries to be the good northern Stark, Night's Watchman and all for Tyrion, bearskin cloak, basically kind of like messing with Tyrion, like, here, you might need this because you Lannisters from the south don't know what cold is, kind of thing, thinking that Tyrion was going to be too pompous and prideful to take it, and it's like a nasty tattered bearskin and it stinks, and Tyrion's like, hell, I'm gonna take it, I'm not going to be cold, So he takes the bearskin, and you can tell that Benjen kind of like regrets giving it to him, because they end up finding out every day that goes by in their 18-day journey, it gets colder and colder. So by the 18th night of their journey, the inns and settlements have long since disappeared, forcing the party to make camp. Being too small to help, Tyrion, as is his custom, goes away from the camp with a book about dragons, one of several brought with him from Winterfell. Tyrion has always been interested in dragons. He remembers seeking out the dragon skulls in King's Landing the first time he was there. He recalls having a torch with him when he discovered the skulls, having the sensation that they seem to like it when he puts his torch to them. There were 3 skulls much larger than the others, and one of the skulls could have swallowed a mammoth whole. Tyrion recalls that King Loren I, an ancestor of the Lannisters, had been about to defeat Aegon Targaryen in battle when the Targaryens unleashed all 3 of their dragons and made short work of their opponents. As Tyrion reads, he is approached by Jon Snow, who asks why he reads so much. Tyrion explains that because his body is twisted and weak, he must rely on his mind, and that a mind needs books like a sword needs a whetstone. That's like a pretty well-known quote in the story. When Jon asks what Tyrion is reading, Tyrion begins to explain about dragons and how he fantasized about them as a child when feeling resentful towards his family. When Tyrion goes so far as to suggest that Jon might feel resentment towards his own family, Jon protests. However, Tyrion continues to push the issue, sarcastically describing how Lady Catelyn treats him as one of her own, how Robb is kind because he is the heir, and how Eddard Stark must have had a good reason to pack Jon off to the wall. When Jon replies that the Night's Watch is a noble calling, Tyrion describes the Watch as a midden heap for the realm's debtors, poachers, rapers, thieves, and bastards, all kept busy watching imaginary grumpkins and snarks. When Jon asks him to stop, Tyrion realizes what he has been saying and feels badly. Reaching out to comfort Jon, he is attacked and knocked down by Jon's direwolf ghost. Unable to get up on his own, Tyrion is forced to apologize to Jon before receiving help. When Tyrion questions why the wolf attacked, Jon jokes that Ghost must have mistaken Tyrion for a grumpkin, which amuses them both. Having calmed down, Jon asks Tyrion if the things he said of the Night's Watch were true. When Tyrion says yes, Jon accepts the truth grimly. The two share some wine and return to camp for a supper or squirrel stew. Tyrion is the last to retire, and Jon has the first watch. And it's kind of has a somewhat of a like a symbolism to it, because Jon gets the first watch, and it's one of the first watch of many to come on the wall. And even though he hasn't set his vows and everything yet to be a formal member of the Night's Watch, it's kind of showing him what's going to be in store for him. A lot of cold nights watching out into the vast nothingness of forest that is beyond the wall. And up until this point, I mean, other than Benjen and Lord Jorah Mormont, Lord Commander, everybody thinks it's a big joke about the Grumpkins and Snarks, you know, because it's been like 8,000 years since they've seen any sign of the others or anything of that nature. So, you know, it's still a big joke. There's a lot of things that still be revealed. This is the very beginning, pretty much, of the story. And when they start off on their journey, it's where the king and Ned and Sansa and Arya and the whole rest of the royal procession, they get to a fork in the road where one part of the king's road goes south, the other goes north. And the main procession of people are going towards King's Landing, where it's just Jon, Benjen, Tyrion, and two of Tyrion's Lannister men to you know, keep guard, help him on his way up to the wall. So it's like you see like the difference, just the different parties, like the ones real royal and regal, and they're going to the big city of King's Landing, where this other one's, you know, dressed in black, meek and sullen, and they're going to, you know, a world where none of that pageantry and southern you know, royalty matters at all. And it's kind of sad to hear how Jon like really thinks, you know, like, because Jon realizes when he's at Winterfell that like his dad's leaving. That's the only person he really had in his court. Like, yeah, Rob's cool with him. He treats him just like a brother. But there's times where Rob lets everyone, not just Jon, but everyone know that he is the heir to Winterfell. Catelyn really does not, you know, has no love for Jon whatsoever. So it's like, you know, Jon's pretty much either got to go with Ned, which wouldn't happen because Ned would think that would be, you know, disrespectful to bring his bastard to court. And Cersei already makes a remark about it anyways. And then with Jon not wanting to stay with Catelyn, you know, it's pretty much would have been Catelyn and Rob and Bran. So he figures, you know, his only choice is to go to the wall. He thinks his Uncle Benjen's there, and his Uncle Benjen always treated him like the nephew he is. And so he figures it's, you know, this place that he hears about from hundreds of years ago where, you know, people would give, you know, that knights and you know, heir apparents to big castles would give up all that to go serve the realms the Night's Watch. And little does he know the truth behind it until Tyrion tells him. And even when Tyrion first tells him, he's like, you know, you're just being a dick. But in the end, Tyrion was the only one that was being honest with Jon and wasn't trying to sugarcoat what it really was. And then you get where Yorn meets up with them when they get to the Wolfswood, and he sees these two rapers with him. And he, you know, he looks and you see how Yorn is. Like Yorn's, they talk about how his hair is matted, he smells sour, and he's got lice just crawling around in his hair. There's not much regal and royal about that, you know. So it's kind of sad to see what Jon has made the decision to do. And then even though Jon probably could say, look, you know, I've heard what this really is. I don't want to do this anymore. He didn't take his vows yet. Pretty sure he could have turned around, you know, and did whatever he needed to do. But he didn't want to let, you know, anybody see that, you know, the truth of what it really was, bring him, you know, to cower down to the task. And I give him a little bit of credit for that, but it's still sad to see like he's giving, and he doesn't know, like that. It almost makes me question though with like Benjen, how much Benjen knew about the truth of Jon. Like, did Ned ever tell Benjen? Because you see when Benjen's talking to him when during the feast, and I think Jon's outside and Benjen comes up to him and he tells him how he's ready to join, he's ready to serve him on the wall, and Benjen tells him, you don't know what you're giving up. And he's like, I don't care, I want to go. He's like, yeah, you would care if you knew what you were giving up. And sometimes that would make me think, does Benjen really to know more about Jon than we think or know? You know what I mean? How did you guys think about it? Do you guys feel that way at all when you seen that? Or did you just think, man, he's just saying, you know, you've been brought up, no matter bastard or not, you've been brought up pretty good, and you're leaving all that behind to serve? Because Benjen doesn't even tell him the truth of the matter, which you would think your uncle would be like, look, this ain't what you think it's going to be.
No. I mean, Jon is 14. He's 14 years old, and he hasn't seen enough of the world to truly decide whether he wants to withdraw from the world. He just looked at the Night's Watch with naivete. He thought that it was the only place for him. And and come to realize that he's giving up so much he doesn't even know what he's running to. He kind of reminds me of Sansa. He's a little starry-eyed when it comes to the wall and the Night's Watch. And he's
Yeah.
going in, into this with naivete, and he's leaving a world that he really doesn't even know. He hasn't even experienced the world. He hasn't even been out in the world. He's been in Winterfell all his life,
Yeah,
and
he
he should have been
parallels
thankful.
Sansa in that matter because they both have this like outlook on like how Sansa thinks of like all these these lordly guys like Joffrey are just gonna be all lordly and regal and they're gonna sweep them off their feet, and then you got like John, where kind of like Bran, where they think it's all about knights and tournaments and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, he's just so young, and it's such a huge decision. And I know
That's
that.
what I think Benjamin was talking about as well. But I do think that at the very least, Benjamin has guessed at his identity if he doesn't know.
Well, there's a theory where they think like that's why Benjen actually went and joined the Night's Watch, because he didn't want to have to live with the responsibility of keeping such a secret like that. He knew up in the wall, if it ever came to question, nobody's going to question Benjen. He's far away, and even if it did come to where he knew, he's got like a pardon, because when you're at the wall, it can't do nothing to you.
Right.
And I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if I bet buying it to it that deep, but I just can't see like Benjen comes off as like, the quintessential little brother of Ned. Like he doesn't seem much different from how Ned carries himself. I just can't see Ned, especially with Brandon being dead, his dad's dead. He's made to marry a woman that he wasn't even supposed to. And like with Benjen, I can't see that he wouldn't want to at least be able to, have that, with somebody else telling him, look, it's okay. We're going to keep our sister's secret and her kid. We're going to take care of them. We're not going to let nothing happen to him. I understand him not telling Catelyn. Like family's family, no matter what. Like he didn't know Catelyn. He wasn't even supposed to marry Catelyn. So it's like I probably did the same thing. Like, and then look how she treats him. You think she'd treat him any better if she found out that he is the heir apparent to the Iron Throne? She already thinks he's going to steal Rob's title.
I think there is something to that, and the reason I think that is because Benjamin is a fairly observant person, and he was also very close with his sister, being the youngest, and and he knows his brother as well to not be the philandering type. He's considered the quiet wolf, and I just think that on that basis of him just knowing each of his siblings in turn, that he would know better than to think that Ned went off and just happened to, sleep with some chick, got her pregnant, and then brought the kid home.
Right, and that's pretty I think dangerous in a way, if like Benjen going to the wall, because at the time, I'm not exactly sure when the exact time Benjen went to the wall, but if it's before like even Rob's born, or even if Rob's already born, like Ned is the last Stark, to hold down Winterfell and the Stark line. It would kind of be, irresponsible for Benjen to go, or Ned descending, whatever the case may be, because you never know. You might not. Catelyn could die in childbirth, and then you ain't got no.
But yeah, because of the mortality rates,
right
in
so
the
like,
world.
all the Starks you can get. There's only two of them until Rob was born.
Right. You always want to err in a spare, and then young children often didn't make it. So
Right.
yeah, I think that's suspect as well.
And they're in the north at that. Like, it's winter all the time. Like you can't, that's just the added, cons to the pros and cons of, doing something like that. I think there has to be something else to it for Ben to just like, and it ain't like Benjen being Ned's brother. Like Ned had to know to watching what it was 500 years ago. So he's got to be like, look, man, why would you give up? Even though you're behind me, I'm the Lord of Winterfell. You'll probably never be a Lord of Winterfell. He could still be something. You know what I mean? There's other smaller keeps he could have, held down, his household guard. There's a lot of things that he could do just because he couldn't be Lord of Winterfell. I just don't understand what drove Benjen to go to the wall. I doubt it was because he knew of, the others and wanted to, get prepared. Like,
We have a comment from Alicia Kingston about that theory. She says there's also a theory that Benjen knew about Lyanna and Rhaegar, and Ned found out and sent him to the wall as punishment.
right.
And then I wrote a comment saying that I can't say it's not possible. Benjamin would want to know about Lyanna and what happened. He probably told Benjen, and Benjen decided to keep the secret and go to the wall.
Right. I mean,
I mean,
Benjamin
they didn't
teases
know.
her at the turning on Harrenhal about how, she starts crying about Rhaegar, and it's like, who knows if that's just, little brother teasing, or he maybe caught them kissing on their tree kind of thing, and then, finds out that he never, all this stuff happens, and, Ned comes back, and then Benjamin's like, yeah, I did see them, canoodling on their tree, but like, well, why didn't you say something, like, kind of thing, you know what I mean?
Right, like he
Yeah.
knows 100% she was a willing participant in
Right.
anything with Rhaegar
And
because
Well,
he
that's
now
the
already, yeah.
And that's
now
the
one thing
vastly
that
believed theory is that Rhaegar kidnapped her against her will. Every person ever talks about that situation puts it in that way. So, if you was to hear, your her own brother, Ned's brother, like saying, it wasn't like that. Why would say you would have kept your brother Brandon from getting killed? You would have kept, and then again, that's not even that could be said because Mad King was crazy. Might have found another reason to kill him, but I'm saying for that one reason of going there and then calling Rhaegar out to come out and die, like, you know what I mean?
well,
And Misha, yeah, oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Shelley.
Well, the one thing that I do wonder about Benjen going to the wall, and then also with how Catelyn is very hung up on her son being the heir, like the actual heir of Winterfell. I kind of wonder if maybe he also might have done that because of Catelyn as well. Like we can see that that Catelyn has a sense of like I don't know if I would call it entitlement, but you know how she is like she looks down upon John. She elevates her children above everything and anything else. And so maybe there was some kind of tension which made Benjen leave the wall as well, so that he didn't have to deal with that kind of a conflict of if he had children and if his children were to try to contest their inheritance of Winterfell versus her and her children kind of scenario.
And I was going to say that definitely in the show this year, and I was hoping we would get some more from this, but when Peter Baelish and Sansa are in the crypts, and she says that's my aunt who was kidnapped, and she goes through the whole hearsay story, and Peter Baelish is like, oh, was she? And you could in my opinion you could tell that he was like he meant that in a kind of flip, like, oh really, like is that really how it was way. So apparently there are a few other people who did know that that's not the way things went down.
Yeah, I mean, well, Peter Baelish was at that tournament. He was at that tournament, so he would probably know something about that for sure. And knowing him, he probably did a lot of research, or as much as research as he could on the Stark family.
I think the people who make it their business to know more, and he was one of those type of people.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. That's a very good point. A very good point. I would like to bring up the subject of the altercation between Jon and Tyrion. Now, Tyrion was telling him the truth about what was going on, warning him and letting him know that the people that he's going up there with are not good people. They're cast-offs. It's like the island of misfit toys and so forth. But I have to say, I sensed a loathing and a mocking in him. And as regards to Jon, I think he was mocking Jon a little bit, mocking him because he was a bastard, mocking his situation, mocking his decision to go on up to the wall in its entirety. It was like he was laughing at him. And the more Tyrion went on with that, the angrier John got. And I'm not here to insult Tyrion by any means, but there is a true darkness in his character. He is a very, very dark character from what you see in the show. We see Tyrion, is very jovial in the show and so forth. And that's very much a part of his character. But I just felt like, during that altercation, he was trying to manipulate John and mock him. And I just feel like Tyrion is not this whitewashed character that he is on the show. He's
No.
very dark. He talk about killing his father and his sister. He talk about how despicable Joffrey was. He talks about just John in general, just making fun of him. I just felt like he was mocking him the entire time. And then when the dire wolf popped up and got on top of him, it kind of put him in his place a little bit.
True.
Yeah, I
And
have a similar feeling. Like I feel that he did start out by, mocking John, and because I mean, it's not to give Tyrion an excuse at all. Like I think Tyrion uses like his tongue gets him in a lot of stuff, and I think a lot of that is because of who he is. Like he can't fight, he ain't big and tall and strapping like a lot of other guys he comes across. So I think he feels like he has to break them down with his mouth and mentally because that's his only defense. I think it did start out like that. Then I think he started to see. I mean, it might have took Ghost to jump on and be like, "Look, you need to chill." But then I think he started to see, John wasn't much different from him. John has the whole, strapping, good-looking guy thing to him, but in the end, he just like he says, the crippled and bastards and broken things kind of thing. He realizes, I think, that John is more on his level, even though he might not be a dwarf and stunted and ugly or anything like that. And like Alicia said, Jamie did the same thing. And I think in comparison, I think Jamie was a lot worse because Jamie had all those good parts about, being a man from a great house and all this. Even before he was on the King's Guard, he was the heir apparent to Casterly Rock and the Westerlands. And that's why I cannot stand when people are like, oh, Jamie's on his redemption arc. Jamie was forced into a redemption arc. You think if Jamie got his hand cut off, didn't get his hand cut off, that he would have been changed? And then I
Sure.
have people say, oh, well, his little journey with Brienne and shackles and smelling like shit with lice in his hair really made him think about what he really was. Like, that's bullshit. Even when he's walking with Brienne, he's talking shit in his head about how ugly she is and how he can't wait till the first opportunity he gets and does this and that. Like, I really do not. When Jamie would have got back to King's Land and got him a nice hot bath and got him a little piece of Cersei, he'd have been right back to being dickhead Jamie. I think if his hand getting cut off made him realize that he's nothing without his right hand. And that's what made him his sword hand, and he's nothing without it. You know what I mean? So I hate when people are like, "Oh, well, Jamie's just on this. He's such a good guy now." No, he was a redemption doesn't have the same value when you're forced into it.
Yeah,
I agree, Tony. I love the way you put that, a little piece of Cersei. I tell you what, I had even been a pie called Piece of Cersei.
oh, ew. But no, like getting back on the thing with Tyrion, I also agree with Misha and Tony that in the beginning Tyrion, it does seem like he is mocking Jon as far as going to the wall and dealing with like mythical creatures and everything like that, because Jon has this sense that he's going and he's doing like a noble thing, joining the Night's Watch. And I think once Tyrion, once the direwolf turns around and pins Tyrion, and Tyrion like gets a jolt of reality real quick, and then as they start talking and conversating, I think Tyrion realizes that this boy was fed a bunch of lies and BS about what would happen at the wall, and wasn't told any information what he was really getting into. And so that's why Tyrion kind of cut the crap and was like, oh shit, like this poor boy has no idea what's in store for him. And that's when he starts having like a change of tune and actually conversates with John to let him know, like, hey, this is what's really going on, this is what you're really getting into. And then that's when he realizes that, okay, well, he's kind of in the same boat as me, because a lot of people try to keep Tyrion out of the loop about things, or they try to do this or that, and Tyrion always has to figure it out his own self with his own intelligence. And so that was, in a sense, Tyrion's way of bringing Jon up and helping to explain that situation to him, because he sees that no one else has ever tried to give Jon any kind of information or guidance whatsoever, because he's a bastard. And since Tyrion considers himself a bastard as well, it's like one bastard helping out another. And he kind of shows Jon, like, look, no one else is going to tell you about reality. No one else is going to inform you about stuff. I'll explain what I can, but you need to be paying attention to things. You need to listen to things and kind of figure things out on your own, because it's not going to be told to you, because since you're a bastard, they really don't think or care to give you any kind of information whatsoever. So
that's why I think Benjen probably, you know, I guess that's why I had the one excuse. I think Benjen might not have came right out, because I think if Benjen went to the wall for similar reasons, you know, maybe he couldn't deal with the stress of knowing the truth. Maybe he thought that would be the best place for Jon, because if Jon was ever find out the truth, he knows how Jon can get a little hot headed. How do you know Jon ain't gonna, you know, all of a sudden want to get it into his head that he wants to, you know, try to fight for his claim or whatever. Maybe just Benjen thought that was the best place for Jon. Benjen probably didn't know he was going to go out on a ranging and never come back. So he probably thought he could look after Jon the best way possible if Ned isn't there for it.
True. And then on top of that, it could have also been a tactic between Benjen and Ned to still keep Jon far away from Robert and anyone else knowing his true parentage, to put him on the wall in the Night's Watch, so that no one really would suspect anything about Jon, and they would just figure, oh, well, you know, he's just the regular bastard of Winterfell, and never question it. Although there are people who throughout the series do question his parentage, but that's later down the road. But as far as for in the beginning stages, I think that might have been why they did that. And I don't like that they didn't inform him about the reality of the wall, but I think they did that because they didn't want him to second guess and to try to stay at Winterfell. And then people start trying to question, oh, okay, well, since Ned isn't here, let's start digging through some stuff and find out who his bastard's mother is, and this and that. And so it might have been kind of like a tactic just to not really like pull a wool over his head, but they didn't want to give him too much information to scare him off, because they needed to place him somewhere, since Ned wasn't going to be around anymore, to go to the Night's Watch for his protection, you know.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. It's just Jon. I mean, as I said before, Jon just made such a huge decision, and he didn't get the right information, and it could have been handled better.
It really it should have been handled better, because the fact that they didn't even try to let him know or to educate him about what was going to go on as far as the wall is concerned, and the fact that no one had ever sat down and talked to this poor boy about his true origins, or anything like that, it makes the whole situation that much more, I guess, depressing, in a sense, that he was thrown into all of these different situations for his protection, but those situations he's being thrown into are just pretty much problematic of their own demise, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And now he has to be up here in the wall. He doesn't, all he knows is that, oh, well, he's a bastard and he was thrown away. And that's kind of the reality of it, is that this boy is the heir the Targaryen dynasty when there's barely Targaryens left to claim that role. And to have him just thrown away like he was just some worthless piece of trash, I find it I find a lot of issue with that with the Men of Winterfell, because for some reason they don't plan things through. They see things as black and white, and they don't account for the gray areas in between. And that has screwed the House Winterfell over and over and over so many times. But it's just it just makes me a little upset because they didn't really think things through or plan things through. And
well, I think they really couldn't. I mean, essentially, the entire government is in a crisis.
True.
Almost immediately, starting at the beginning of the book. Ned's mentor has been killed. Catelyn's sister has been killed, which is the Eyrie is one of their major allies. You know, where Ned grew up. And I think
Liza wasn't killed, Jennifer.
Oh, that's right. Shit. Okay. Well, you know, she's crazy though. And she's, you know, starting a bunch of crap, saying, and you know, they all, and I see what Shelley's talking about. Like, that's the one thing about Ned and Catelyn. Boy, everything that comes to them from certain people, they just believe it. You know, they just believe it without any doubt, whatever.
That's what my problems with Catelyn.
Like the whole thing with Lysa and how Catelyn is just like, oh, well, that's my sister, I have to believe her. It's like, did you not even try to stop and figure it out? Like, I'm surprised
they never suspected that Lysa was poisoned, that Lysa poisoned Jon Arryn herself. Nobody ever suspected that throughout the entire situation. But that's not what I wanted to though. I wanted to bring up that I think it was just a little bit of bad timing that ended up positioning Jon at the wall, because honestly, Eddard didn't have time to make other arrangements, basically.
True.
And then also for his protection. And then I get a sense whenever I read a conversation between Benjen and Jon, like Benjen would have loved to have raised that boy. Like there's a special place in his heart that he really doesn't have for the other legitimate Stark children that Jon has. And that's also why I think he knows more than we're led to believe, because why would you sacrifice your whole life? Being that you're actually the spare to Winterfell, you'd be a good marriage prospect for allies, just like Arya. Nobody ever, you know, talked about Arya joining the Silent Sisters or anything. No.
True.
So he was kind of in that same position. But why would you give up your life to protect the son of a most beloved sister? That's why you would give up your life.
Well, and that's why I question maybe Catelyn had something to do with Benjen leaving and going to the wall in the first place, because there would, in my opinion, like I really don't see why Benjen would go to the wall or even want to go to the wall. But then when you look at how Catelyn even treats Jon and how she talks about her children, what it seems like to me is that might have been a push to get rid of Benjen so that he wouldn't have any heirs to contest the lineage of Winterfell. And because Catelyn, like, she really has a sense of, these are my children, these are the heirs of Winterfell, kind of like there are no other heirs, and Jon will never be able to inherit Winterfell because he's a bastard, and she just loves to rub it in. And for me, I just wonder why, if you have a house that's small as it is, you already have the sister that has lost her life, the brother that has lost their life, and the actual grandfather that lost his life as well. Mind you, we don't even get the story about where their grandmother is, but I don't know. I haven't read into it to find out what happened in that regard. But to have just to have one heir, just to have Ned there, and him to only have the only heirs to Winterfell is kind of questionable, seeing as there's not a lot of Starks as it is. And so, and the whole thing about how the lone wolf dies in the pack, but the pack survives, then why would Benjen want to turn around and leave and be the lone wolf on his own, and to leave Winterfell only to Ned and to Catelyn, who has certain ideas about what she wants and how she wants things to be done. That's just what always has been a question in my mind is why they would have had Benjen left, because even if Benjen would have stayed and had a couple of heirs, that would have at least helped as far as the stronghold period, and as far as the family name, and to keep it stronger, to have extra like cousins and siblings and everyone around there. And plus, if Ned was called to leave to go to like King's Landing, you would still have a decent successor with Benjen. And then from there, Benjen would be able to handle things a lot better than what Catelyn did, because she was kind of a failure with that, and she wasn't a true Stark or a true Northerner to be able to deal with the whole of Winterfell in her possession at that time. You know.
I have a question from Septa Shayna Sapphires. She asked, at the end of the chapter, does Tyrion have true remorse for upsetting Jon? And this goes towards the altercation. I mean, I don't think
Absolutely.
so. I have to disagree. I don't believe that at all. I think that he was trying to control Jon, and manipulate him, telling him about, I mean, I'm not trying to insult him, but I just don't see him as that jovial character that they want to make him out to be. I think that he uses his wits and his intelligence to manipulate. And I think that's what he was doing. I think that's what he was doing with Jon when he was talking about the dragon flame and stuff like that. And at the end of the altercation, Jon was staring into the flames.
Now, sorry, Misha, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that I don't really see so much remorse in that. I mean, I just feel like Tyrion is a very cerebral character. He's very cerebral. I mean, he said it himself. He said it, I read a lot because a sword needs a whetstone and a mind needs a book. He compares his mind to a sword. And like a sword, it can do damage to a person. And
I mean, I do believe that, but I do believe that. And at first he says it mockingly, but he's like, oh, you're so polite for a bastard. But really, Jon did handle himself rather well. Yeah. And, then when he's had enough and the wolf has pushed him down, he makes Tyrion apologize to him and ask for help. Oh, yeah. And Tyrion does it. But then at the end of the chapter, Tyrion thinks to himself, I took that. I mean, I feel like Tyrion knows, you know what? I read him wrong. Yeah. He's not the pompous little shit my nephew is, etc. Somebody's placed him in a hard life. He doesn't deserve this necessarily. I took it too far. And, I believe Tyrion does have empathy at times. Now, we see a really hateful Tyrion. Of course, this is getting way further. We see Tyrion do hateful things, but there are certain people that he does come to have genuine empathy for, and they have a moment. Yeah. Jon and him have a moment, I feel like, that binds them, because Tyrion just straight tells him the truth. And instead of Jon getting mad, and Tyrion even notes this, look, most people can't handle the truth. They don't want to hear the truth. They'd rather hear lies. But I'm telling you, know the truth about everything that you're getting into, basically, is his advice. And then you know best how to protect yourself. And
I think it's a calculated move.
I think that was his way of trying to make it up for him. But still, looking back, I think Tyrion's like, damn, I really did. I had an insult to injury. Look at that kid, staring into the fire, and he thinks to himself, and even in the narrative, it says, and Tyrion goes to bed sad. Mm-hmm. I think he has pity. I think Tyrion always still has a lot of pity on himself, and everything. But I think whenever he can empathize that, look, this is pretty fucked up too. Like, their situation is pretty bad too. That's when he really does have empathy for somebody.
Now, when it comes to Tyrion, I'm kind of on both sides, with Misha thinking that he wasn't too heartfelt about it. But Tyrion does have a sense of remorse for the boy too. So I think it was more kind of calculated than an emotional thing that Tyrion had with Jon, because in a sense, when he starts mocking the boy and he's saying all this and that about what's really going on at the wall, and Jon doesn't like it because he thinks that he's being offensive to the actual cause. Like, when it comes down to it and Tyrion finally realizes that Jon is passionate about this, but he's completely clueless, I think that Tyrion sees that as an opportunity to say, okay, well, no one else has told this boy anything. Let me at least sit down and tell him the honest truth from what I understand about what he's getting into. And then once he does, it must have left at least a little bit of an impression on Tyrion, because Tyrion can see himself in Jon and sees those kind of situations. But the only thing is that when it comes to Tyrion, he really doesn't like to have too much emotions for other people, just because of how his life has been. And it's very rare for him to really open up to people. So the fact of him sitting down and explaining things to Jon, I think that it was more of an, okay, well, since no one else has trust you or has given you this information, I will. And once he sees how Jon handles this, the information, there could be a potential that Tyrion sees that, not, I don't know if I would call it like an opportunity, but as he establishes something as far as a connection with Jon, that could end up being something better down the road, maybe in Tyrion's favor, which honestly it does help him in the long run, when he meets up with Jon again. And so he, in his mind, I think it was a little bit of Tyrion kind of saying, oh, well, shit, they're treating you the same way. So, like, I'm not going to sit here and play politics or try to lie to you or nothing. I'm just going to give it to you straight. But I don't think that it was motivated to kind of help Jon or to hurt him. Except for it, in the beginning, Tyrion was just like, oh yeah, you're going to such a magical place, aren't you? And then once he realizes that Jon really thinks that it is a magical place of honor and duty and everything, he sits down and he just bursts the boy's bubble to let him know that the reality is that you're getting into something and it's going to suck. And I think that's the only reason why Tyrion felt the way that he did, because it's kind of a reflection on how he was raised and how a lot of people didn't even tell him anything and he had to learn it himself. So I think like he had some empathy for the boy, but I don't think it's anything heartfelt,
I disagree. When he didn't see the wolf, we've got a saying down here in the South. It's called, don't sign a check your ass can't cash. And he didn't see that wolf. And when that wolf could have killed him so quick, and then he's like, okay, well, I'll just wait for you to leave till the wolf. And Jon, he didn't rub it in. He didn't do that.
Well, I think he did.
That's why I won Tyrion over, because it was like, no, just ask me nice, Lannister.
No,
he did. And so Jon helped him. And I think he won Tyrion there.
No, I think that he did mock him just a little bit. Just to give him a taste.
Yeah, he is at first. But then when he helps Tyrion with, he doesn't sit there and be like, get him, and threaten him or do anything like that. And he's like, no, I'm going to help you. I'm not going to leave you out here in the cold with my wolf on you for like an hour or two, or anything spiteful. Jon just doesn't really have spite in him at this point. And Tyrion recognizes that, and that's just my opinion, though. That's the way I read it.
Yeah. I also want to touch a little bit on the North itself and the Wolf's Wood. And also Tyrion's adaptation of it. it really shows that he's very, good at adapting to a situation. That's a good part of Tyrion. I think it's how he's managed to survive, all of these trials and tribulations he's gone through throughout the books. He's very adaptive. He really knows how to adapt to the situation. I think he knows that better than any Lannister. Him accepting the cloak, even though it stank, but he wore it proudly and kept moving. Even though he was hurting, his legs was hurting, from riding all day long, and he was cramping. He didn't complain. He went through this very bravely and very strong, and I have to give him credit for that. Because, I don't believe that any of those other Lannisters would have adapted so well to such
Like
a tough
Lancel.
journey.
Can y'all see Lancel trying to go to the wall at this point?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like Cersei when like just the ride from King's Landing to Winterfell, like they talk about how enormous the wheelhouse was that she rode in. Like, could you imagine if she had a ride up to the wall in that cold? They'd be complaining the whole time.
Oh
She
yes,
probably refused to
absolutely.
even do it.
Oh no, she
Right.
wouldn't do it. Of course not. But I have to give Tyrion credit, for leaving, his family and everything he knew in King's Landing and exploring. He's very much an explorer, and he
I
does that
agree
a
on
lot.
that.
He
I agree 100% on that. And I agree with you. That's one of the best things about Tyrion. That's one of his good qualities is that he can kind of, he can get in the low places.
yeah.
He adapts, he moves on and even, and yeah, and he was totally messing with them. Like when he says to himself, well, I get Benjamin Stark back right here. He's going to think I'm going to turn that nasty, like Tony said, that nasty bear cloak down. And instead he's like, oh yes, thank you.
Yeah,
So
and
No,
that to me was just a little hilarious because for one, Benjen thought that he was going to maybe get a rise out of Tyrion or have that kind of disdain that a lot of the Lannisters do because they're like, oh well, our stuff doesn't stink and we won't take anything that's of a certain caliber or not. And but unfortunately, like Tyrion isn't created like regular Lannisters for his own self. He's seen that as an opportunity, period, and he said, yeah, let's go, I'll take that, I'll take whatever kind of raggedy whatever you got as long as it's warm. Because in the end, like, that's the difference between someone sitting down and being cold just because they can't deal with a certain fashion or if it's not up to par
for
versus
pride, to be
yeah
cold
for
over pride.
yeah, and honestly, Tyrion has gotten to a point where he's probably been in situations where he's had to lessen himself in order to deal with other situations where his
Many
brother and
times. Many times.
hadn't never had to deal with that. And so yeah, like I see
And
that
let's also
as
remember Tyrion knew where he was going. He told
yep.
John better than John even knew. Tyrion knew where he was going, and one of the first things he acknowledged was his biggest mistake, aside from the maps not being the same as really seeing it, is that
Yep.
his clothes were nowhere near warm enough.
Yep. And so, like, and that's kind of where Benjen kind of screwed himself over by even turning around and offering that raggedy piece of cloak in the first place. Because if Benjen would have sat down and thought about it, period, he wouldn't have even tried to goat Tyrion by saying or trying to
Benjen
get
has
him
misjudged Tyrion, just like Tyrion misjudged John.
yeah.
I like
true.
how
And so
they described Yorn though, how like when he first walks up, how his hair is all matted and he smelled sour. And you can tell
and
his
didn't he
clothes
have
ain't been
lice
worn.
too?
Yeah, he said lice crawling around
Yeah.
his hair. I'm like, damn.
Yes. Yes, and so and that's why and that's kind of where John sees his first impression of a real Night's Watchman, because his uncle, like, of course his uncle's been out there in Winterfell, and he's been able to get like a good hot shower and a good meal in him and everything. I mean, they're not going to let Benjen just walk around in tathers and everything in Winterfell, because technically speaking, he is still a lord of Winterfell. Even though he did take the black, he is still of a noble house. So he kind of has to keep a certain appearance to himself. That, and with the king being there in the courts and everything, he can't have the sloppy look to himself. But then the minute that you see Yorn come in and he's just in tatters and he's beyond dirty and he's got these two criminals that he's bringing with him, it gives John a reality shock, and he's just like, wait, like, why is it that
Yoren even is like, they rape us from the fingers.
yeah, and so poor John is sitting here now. He's just like faced with something different. Like, oh, okay, like what in the world am I getting into? And he's just looking like, why is this guy like just looking all scruffy? But he's supposed to be a part of this noble Night's Watch. And when Tyrion sits down and he explains it to him in just plain English, that's why John looks at it and he sits down and he realizes, oh, okay, so they weren't really doing this to help me out. They were just sending me to the wall to just throw me away, like they throw away all these other unwanted people. So I that's kind of how I see it. But yeah, Benjamin.
Yeah, we have a question from Ms. Vengeance. What
Avery.
then Tyrion took to Jon so easily is because they shared dragon blood. And I think that's a good segue, to the next part of the story. The dragon bone, the dragon skeletons, and the field of fire. That's the big thing that happened in this chapter. So the question is, what if they took to each other so easily because of the dragon blood? I mean, I do think it's very interesting, his love for dragons. Why would he, care so much for the dragons? But he does have a very big fascination with those dragons. He cared enough about them, to go down, to see the dragon skulls and the dragon skeletons. And I think I really, enjoyed the fact that they put a little bit of the Targaryens in there. They may have some sort of connection.
They may. And I've always thought that Tyrion was truly a Lannister. However, this is what always makes me question my set opinion on that, is the fact that he had those dragon dreams.
Mm-hmm.
However, we know that Bloodraven is messing with folks. And, it also makes me wonder, like, specifically when that wolf takes him down, the wolf never does make a noise, though. He pins him down, but he does not really move to hurt him. And we see Ghost in other situations, immediately take somebody out or growl or be more threatening. And what Tyrion notes is his red eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I also want to draw a little bit of attention. Like I always say, I think it's always important to pay attention to whatever books anybody, it brings up that anybody is a reading. And he's reading a book when John approaches him on dragons and the properties. He's on a specific chapter about the properties of dragon bone.
Mm-hmm. And it's a very the dragon bone itself, it has very high in iron, which makes it have a dark, shiny black onyx looking appearance. And I really wish that they had done that for the show. When they made the dragon's skulls, when Arya goes down into the dungeon, I would have liked to have seen them painted black and put some sheen on it or something like that.
Yeah.
To look. I mean, it wouldn't have costed much, and it would have been really good for the show to see that.
I agree.
But, that's the way the show rolls. I also want to touch a little bit on the Wolf's Wood before we go on into the Field of Fire. It was good to see, and hear about the Wolf's Wood, because honestly, I didn't really know what the Wolf's Wood was. And I have read these books, and I've heard people talk about it, but I really didn't understand what it was. It's this forest, further in the north, a huge forest. And it's filled with every type of creature that you can imagine, in those woods. And wolves, sing and they howl all through the night in those woods. And it's really I was very surprised by that because apparently I might have forgotten. But it was good to see the Wolf's Wood, and see what it was all about. It's something that it's a very special place. I was surprised that there were no werewoods in the Wolf's Wood. I would have expected to see, those big weirwood trees in the Wolf's Wood, but we didn't really see any of those. Um, and now Tyrion was reading a book, and it was I can't remember the name of the book, but it did discuss the field of fire, and it was about uh, the the gardeners. Yeah, the gardeners of High Garden and the Lannisters, and they had tried to mount a defense against the Targaryens. And I just thought that that was really, really good to read that section of the story. Does anyone else have any comments on the Field of Fire? Hello?
No, no.
Yeah, I'm here. I mean, I think it's interesting, and it says that that was one of the only times that I believe all three of the first dragons ever came together in battle. That they were losing the battle until Aegon and his sisters appeared with what was it, Balerion the Dread? Was it Meraxes and Vagar?
Vagar and Balerion.
Yeah.
And they were
So
given.
I thought that was interesting. And then basically what they burned like 4,000 men alive, and then the battle was over.
Mm-hmm. And they were given the names of gods. And I would like to know exactly what gods what did they represent? Those three gods represent. They never really talked about that. I don't remember, hearing any god named Valerian, Veraxis, and Meraxes and Vagar. I would have liked to have known more about those three gods that those dragons were named for.
Yeah, Vagar, Meraxes, and Balerion.
But what religion? What's the religion that those gods are associated with? I don't
Oh,
think.
that's a good point. I don't believe I've ever seen anybody make a video about that, or if I have,
What was it about? Say that again.
the names of the dragons. It's stated that they were named after gods.
Oh,
So
yeah,
I'm
the
assuming that's
Valyrian
Valyrian
gods.
gods.
Yeah, they said of Valyrian gods. They had like many Valyrian gods. And I've seen one of the history and lore videos. They talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I might have to revisit that and bone up on that
Me
because
too.
I honestly, that kind of threw me for a loop. I didn't know that they were named after gods, and all I could think of was what religion are they associated with, and so I definitely gotta, bone up on that. It's good to reread this. It was a
Yeah,
lot.
I think the Valyrians like their whole like Valyrian religion as a whole is like not as uniform as maybe like the Faith of the Seven or even R'hllor for that matter. Like even R'hllor, like the the God of Light, it doesn't really seem too uniform as it comes to a religion. Like the Faith of the Seven, like they have their Pope figure as like the High Septon. And like even before Aegon came and made everything more centralized to King's Landing, like I think it was the Star Sept, or I forget. I think that's what it was called. In Old Town was the main headquarters for the Faith of the Seven. So it was kind of like in parallels with Catholicism, where you got centralized in Rome, you got your figurehead in the Pope, you got other septons, which are like the cardinals and stuff, where the Lord of Light, they don't have that one high priest, but they have a ton of other priests, and they have this, where they literally buy like slave kids to be like temple prostitutes, and then they got the Order of the Fiery Hand, where it never numbers no more than 1,000 or no less, and it's like they're just these religion warriors, and you would think. Maybe we'll still see it in the book because I know they talk about it in the World of Ice and Fire book. But you would think the show or the book, You know, and like I said, we got still have time for the book, but you think they would use, you know, brought them up or use them a little more when it comes to like how they use their red priest and priestesses to go around and preach about, you know, the prince that was promised in Azor High and how the real enemy is the great other. You would think if they have this 1,000-man like ultimate warrior like clan of fighters that they would send them that way to help if they were so into beating this great other. But you don't really hear about it other than the World of Ice and Fire book. And like a lot of people started theorizing when Melisandre says how she's going to go back to Volantis. Like, oh, she's going to be grabbing the fire hand. Like, I don't think so. And like, they don't even mention it until the World of Ice and Fire book that I know of. I mean, maybe I'm mistaken. I don't know. I don't act like I know everything when it comes to this. So somebody else heard it somewhere else, you know, let me know. But I don't think I've never, you know, heard them mentioned at all until the World of Ice and Fire book. So you would think that, you know, for a religion that is so into this, beating this, they only believe in two gods, theirs and the great other, and they're at battle with one another. And if you have this, you know, clan of 1,000, you know, warrior type men or whatever, men or women, maybe they're like Vikings, who knows? But, you know, you would think they'd be in Westeros if that's where they think this battle is going to go down at. Why would they just be chilling in Volantis? Like, if they're that invested into this war with the great other, you know what I mean? Like, but maybe it was just a thing that came up in the World of Ice and Fire. You know, it was co-written with other people. Like, there's a lot of things that came up in that we never heard beforehand on any of the books, you know. So maybe it was just something that came up then. Maybe it's not as big as, you know, I'm making it out to be. So I would just think, though, if it did exist, that they'd be more invested in throwing them into the mix. I mean, 1,000 men's 1,000 men. You know what I mean? No matter if you're gonna how many the Knights King's gonna bring, 1,000 is better than none.
Yeah, that's true.
There's somebody that's that invested in taking down that great other that is, you know, in contrast with their Lord of Light.
I want to give a shout out to Nyx, PK, the Red Witch, Ion Tron, Jackie, Vengeance, and everyone else who has joined us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. If you have any questions, leave them right now. Leave them right now in the chat, and we'll answer every one of them. Yeah, as far as the story goes, it's a very, very informative chapter. It had a little bit of everything. Everything was in this, and I really appreciate that. Is there any standout parts for my people on the panel? Any parts that stood out to you?
We already kind of went over, but yeah, when Tyrion is going all about how, like, you know, the landscape, how like it changes, and just like how the weather itself changes. Like, yeah, the north is it's the biggest of all the kingdoms. It pretty much can fit most of the other kingdoms inside the north. Like, the north is huge. And they talk about how, you know, Winterfell itself is halfway up the north from the bottom to the top. So for it to take them 18 days to get the other halfway up to the wall, like, says a lot for its size. It says a lot for how the landscape probably is from Winterfell up. So even if it might take from Winterfell down to the neck in the Riverlands, it could probably take half that time, just because of the fact the weather would get warmer, the landscape wouldn't be as rugged and mountainous to traverse. So I could see, you know, it just, I love the concept, how it keeps progressing. Like, it goes from, you know, seeing these forests, and then it goes to like he like keeps like telling you how it changes, and I really like that because it makes you feel like you're looking at it yourself. And George R. R. Martin does a great job at making you visualize what the reader is saying. And that's why I think it was a great idea to have this point of view style chapters than just a narrator narrating people's, you know, perspectives. You're actually getting to think with that person's thinking. And I think that's so like genius on his part.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Absolutely. I do appreciate the POV chapters. And it's more than just the POV. You get to see the other reactions of other characters. And
Mm-hmm.
George R. R. Martin, has really woven everything together very beautifully and created
Mm.
a very good story. And I really, really appreciate that. What about you, Shelley? Was there like a standout part for you that you really enjoyed
Um,
after and of the show as well?
well, honestly, when it comes to the whole fact of Tyrion being pinned down and he has to change his perspective, and then the whole reality that sits in for John in between how he sees the difference between his uncle Benjen and then Yorn, and then the information that Tyrion gives to him. For me, it's just kind of a little bit depressing, for John, period, because he finally starts to see what it is, the reality of what he's gotten himself into. And there is no turning back. There is no trying to get out of it. And so John just kind of does it like a self reflection, and he just accepts what the fate has given to him. And so that was really the thing that stood out to me as far as the chapter was concerned, was just the revelation for John about the reality of what he's getting into.
Oh yeah. He's, as I said before, he's very starry-eyed, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of hard to, when that reality hits. And it's
Yeah.
such disappointment in John. You can feel the disappointment rising in him, seeing Yarn,
And
seeing the other people, the rapers, how his appearance was, and how hard everything is. Right there in the beginning. You can
Yeah.
really feel him brooding.
Nothing hurts quite so much as disappointed hopes.
Oh yeah.
yep. And that, unfortunately, like, I could sit down and I can point and tie that, um uh, as far as just dealing with like regular teenage ants and hopes and dreams and everything. I know that it's like considered like a different kind of time frame and everything, but when you're like a teenager and you're of a certain age, you kind of think of things in a certain way or a certain light. And then when reality kicks in and you see things differently, that's when you go from being a child to being an adult. And unfortunately for poor John, this is his moment of, okay, well, I'm not a little kid anymore. Yeah, they're not telling me everything, but now I'm starting to see things. Now I'm starting to understand things. And I have someone else's perspective, which was Tyrion, who gave me more information than anything else. And so this was like a growing up situation, for John, in my opinion. And it
Mhm.
kind of sucks the way he had to find out this information, and how he had to assimilate it that quickly, because there was no other option for him except to just deal with the reality of it, and at least to internalize it and to say, okay, well, I went from one crappy place, now I'm going to an even worse crappy place, and it's even colder than what it was. So yeah, and
Exactly. When he
yep,
leaves John staring at the fire, I don't think John is sitting there like Tyrion thinking about his father burning or Rob burning or anything like that. What I think he's trying to do is see himself through the situation and his disappointments.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I mean, I just know from personal experience, man,
Yeah.
disappointment is one of the things, in my opinion, that hurts you the most in life is when you've
and
built something up or you're
yep,
looking forward to something and then either you don't get to go, you don't get to do it, or it's not what you thought it was.
and see, and
And
that's
it leaves
why.
you very butthurt and this is an even bigger situation because this is his new life. I mean, this
and
is all there is now. So he
and
has
that's
got to
why.
learn what Tyrion has taught him in this short space. Don't forget their other conversation at
Yeah,
Winterfell.
Mhm.
yes,
He's got to
and
learn a little bit from Tyrion in this situation and not Benjen and not all the people who have been teaching him his whole life, which is another thing for him to overcome. That all the
yep,
people he thought around him who were giving him all this vital information, who were the most important people in the world, right now he needs this outsider's perspective more than anybody else so that he can get over this hurdle, his disappointment, and make do with what he's got. And he needs some of Tyrion's adaptability.
And see, that's why when it came to Tyrion, like in a sense, like the reason why I said that he was kind of both not too invested emotionally, but then he was affected because Tyrion realized that, oh crap, like no one else has given this poor boy any vital information. And like it's just like if you were to go and you were to find like a teenager or youth in like your community, and they're sitting down talking about, oh yeah, I'm going to go into the military and this and that, and they're going to do this and that, and it's going to be great. And then you sit down and you tell them, look, this is the reality of what happens when you go into the military.
Exactly. And I wish, is Alicia still in the chat? Because I believe Alicia really was in the military. And, you know, a lot of people go into the military thinking, I'm going to be a pilot. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. No, you're going to do what they tell you to do.
Yep. And they have this sense of duty and honor and all of this, just like what John had felt. But then the reality is when you sit down and you get into the nitty gritty, it's not as glamorous as what people try to portray it, you know? And unfortunately, like if you're an individual and you're just meeting up with a kid and they're all starry-eyed and they have no clue what they're getting into, and then you break it down to them, and then you see and you pretty much you kill those dreams and those hopes and all of those fantasies, then yeah, you're going to feel like crap afterwards. And that's kind of what Tyrion felt like was crap, because he was just like, well dang, like I had to be the one to break it to this poor boy. And that left him with a little bit of a heavy heart, in a sense, you know, like it wasn't the fact that Tyrion was invested in trying to explain all of this to John, but he seen the situation and he gave him all the information that he could, since John pretty much had none. And then Tyrion afterwards felt a little bad because you just turn around and you just burst the bubble. You just burst this poor boy's bubble and threw a whole bunch of rocks and dirt in its place, kind of deal, you know? So that's how I seen the whole interaction my own self, you know?
Yeah, Tyrion wouldn't have explained it to the likes of Waymar boys. Let me put it like that. He wouldn't have explained it to Waymar. But John's different. John's different. We know that about John. And John is like that. When John gets to the wall, for a little bit, he's kind of standoffish, but then he makes friends and he realizes, you know what? This is the people I have to be with. They represent this really well in the show. I think this is really one of the good parts they do. Like, and I think Tyrion is instrumental in this too, in the show, telling him, hey, look, you know, they're not going to forgive you for making them look like shit every day, for beating them down, you know, help them, be a leader. And it's very important. It's a very important part of the story, the way that John learned to say, you know what, I've got to just take what I'm given, because you know, and I've got to work with that.
And see, like for my own self, like I don't think there could be like a part where Tyrion probably starts to warm up to John. But then in the sense, Tyrion also is sitting here and he's just giving the boy information to where other people aren't even giving the poor boy the time of day to help, to kind of, not to shelter, but like to guide him, like where other people are supposed to be guiding John right now and they're failing, or they're just like not paying attention, or they're not doing what they're supposed to, like his uncle Benjen not paying attention to him and showing him the ropes. Tyrion just kind of takes it up onto his own to show John the ropes and to say, look, you need to pull yourself back and look at it from another perspective. And so it's kind of like in that situation, in that encounter, Tyrion was just he was kind of put in that situation and he just went for it. And like, well, if the boy is sitting here and he's and we're having this conversation, I might as well not try to water it down or make it look fluffy and pretty and everything. I'm just going to tell you the basics right here and tell it to you.
John got angry, but he wasn't mad at Tyrion. He was mad at the situation.
Exactly.
He was mad at the situation. I mean, it already talked about how he was looking at Thorin, Yoren and the two guys he had with him, and he's like, and he's got this look on his face, like, and Tyrion sees that, and he's like, and
I
at
think,
first he is jobbing him, but then when he sees, like, John's not like, oh, shut up, dwarf, you don't know anything, the usual responses Tyrion gets. John is very receptive to the truth, which Tyrion even points out. He's like, look, like Tyrion says, I'm a man who appreciates the truth. And he's like, most men aren't. And John's like, and John wants to hear it. John wants to know, because he's already half-assed realized for himself that he has got himself in a situation that is different from the one he created in his head.
And so that's why my own self, like, I think it was something that Tyrion kind of had to develop, that kind of relationship with John, because at first Tyrion really didn't even care one way or the other. But then after sitting down and having a moment with John, it got to a point where it started dawning on Tyrion. And I think that after that situation, and after him having to pretty much throw dirt on that poor boy's busted bubble, like, he starts to have not feelings, but he starts to have compassion for John, and that's where their relationship starts. Was in that moment in this chapter,
Well, yeah, I mean, let me say this. I think that Tyrion did want to inform him, but it was just the way he said it. And I think Tyrion even realized it himself. He said in the chapter, maybe I deserve this, with this blood in my mouth and the dirt around me. Maybe this is what I deserve, because I think he knew what he was doing. He was telling him.
He did know. No, I agree, Misha. He knew what he was doing. He was baiting him.
Yes.
And he was wanting a reaction out of him. Tyrion kind of creates these situations to get a reaction out of somebody for his own amusement, which is what I see, what you mean, Misha, about he has a very dark side. He's rather spiteful. He tricks people. But John doesn't react the way that he thinks John will react. And that is what wins Tyrion over.
Yeah.
And it's because John holds his own, and he listens, and he actually acknowledges that Tyrion is giving him truth and information, and he doesn't take the bait that Tyrion thought he was going to, and get all hot-headed and act like a crazy northern man in that regard.
If Tyrion would have done that to Joffrey or just about anybody else, they would have left their wolf sitting there on him, maybe. But John was like, no, just ask me nicely. He's like, John, I would really appreciate your help. And he even admits to himself that he hates that, but he's been through humiliations of this kind so much. Well, so has John. Has John. And think about this. From Tyrion's whole trip, if you come away with, did he make a connection with any? Remember now, he goes through a lot, but did he make a connection with anybody on these journeys? I would say that he made a connection with John.
And he does, and that's why it makes
he comes back to play later.
And the situation creates something for Tyrion to have to pretty much eat humble pie, and to say, okay, well, I can't turn around and I can't goat this boy like I would someone else. And so,
but John had already had to eat it. John had already had to eat humble pie when he had to admit, I didn't know what I was getting myself into, and I just, just the way John handles himself. And in this chapter, remember, y'all, he's 14 years old.
Yeah.
But he's, of course, we know that in this time, that's already considered a mature age, but still unexperienced.
Yeah,
unexperienced. I mean, even Benjen, a seasoned person of politics, and being around men or whatever, he lets himself be goaded out of his comfort, out of his warmth for the journey. And John doesn't really take the bait like that.
Yep. And that's why Tyrion had to come to that realization.
He gains a bit of respect from Tyrion in the end, I believe, because he takes his information and uses it Well, at the end of the chapter, he still hasn't used it. He's very much left upset at the end of this chapter. Tyrion even goes to bed sad. I mean, it particularly says that. That's what sticks out for me is the fact that for once, Tyrion got as good as he was given, basically, with the whole ghost thing. But instead of Jon really turning that to his advantage, like imagine when Joffrey gets bit and he throws the sword and he does all this shitty little stuff, then he ends up getting the wolves killed. Jon doesn't do anything like that. He just ask me nicely, Lannister. And then when he does, he not only pulls, it says he pets Ghost, has him sit back on his haunches, goes over there, helps Tyrion up, even picks up the book.
Yep.
Even picks up the book. Even a little shit would have just kicked the book. You know, I mean, think about it. I mean, he really, after he does what Jon asked, and he doesn't do it malicious. He's not like, well, ask me nice, you little shit. Now, how do you know? He's just like, ask me nice. And I think that impresses upon Tyrion, you know, wait a minute, I took this shit too far. This is his life.
But they both gained a sense of respect for each other, and that's why from that moment on they established some kind of a relationship,
a mutual respect, and they even share an inside joke. When he gets back to the camp, Benjen comes out of the shelter he's built for him and Jon, and he says, "There you are, Jon. Damn it, don't go off like that by yourself. I thought the others had gotten you." I was Grumpkins, and. Jon had called him a grumpkin, and so they even share a little inside joke. So, you know, no, I don't believe Tyrion started out trying to be this helpful, you know, person at all. I think he started out trying to get under just everybody's skin as much as he could, which is what I think Tyrion does. Instead of waiting for you to be rude to him, he kind of goads you into it. And I think that's some of Tyrion's natural defense mechanisms.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was definitely on the defensive.
Yes. I tell you what, though, you notice what he doesn't do? It doesn't say that he said one crossword to Yoren. We don't get that from the chapter at all. So...
And that's why it just puts in a whole nother perspective, because Tyrion has to sit down and he has to reevaluate the whole situation and how he approached it, and that's why he has a change of heart after Jon has Ghost get off of him and he shows him like some actual decency. Tyrion has to pull himself back.
And just as where Jon wasn't spiteful. When Ghost jumped on Tyrion, Tyrion turned around and wasn't spiteful and wasn't like, well, fuck this little mofo. You know, I'm going to let him go on up to the Night's Watch and think, you know, just let him go in the dark or whatever. He really, you know, tries to create a rapport with him and tries to be like, look, you know, it is what it is. You know, I'm sorry. It is what it is. I've kind of got the shit into this stick in my life too, you know.
Exactly.
And I think he does feel like, you know, I misjudged him. And because Tyrion has a natural contempt for anybody else kind of his class. And Tyrion kind of does consider, even though Jon's a bastard, you never really hear Tyrion be like, he's saying it, you know, trying to get a reaction. He's not really saying it in a malicious type of way because he kind of considers himself, you know, less than. Because I don't think he considers himself less than, but he knows everybody else does.
Yeah, I said this in another.
Kind of overlooked and looked over, and people, you know, who can we pick on? And you know, that's what bullies do. That's what people do when they're insecure about themselves. They find the easiest target in the room and gang up. That's what bullies do.
And that's why Tyrion gave Jon the advice to use it as a badge of honor, because if you turn around and if just like when he's trying to explain to Jon, like, if you don't allow it to just be a derogatory term and you take it for yourself and you own it, then no one else can use that against you. And that was really good advice that Tyrion gave to Jon, because that is something that is going to be thrown at him over and over and over again for the rest of his life. And so instead of sitting down and getting upset over it, Tyrion does sit down and starts counseling and starts, in a sense, becoming a mentor for Jon, because no one else was mentoring him and showing him, look, you're a bastard, but that doesn't mean that you have to just allow people to just treat you like this or that or whatever. Own it take it and then go from there, and you will take that power from other people when they try to call you a bastard, you know?
And we know from the previous chapters that John does have a quick temper, yet he's the quietest of the Stark children. He's the most introspective. You know, he is somebody who has always kind of felt his situation, you know, keenly, and had to live with it and had to make do. So, yeah, Tyrion just misjudged him, and I think Tyrion felt better of it, and he tried to remedy it as best he could. But he still felt bad about it when he and that's where we see a little bit of human in Tyrion, because I agree with Misha on what she says. Like, when we get later in the chapters, I mean, Tyrion straight out rapes the girl just for spite, just because he can. You know, over there at the cheesemongers. That's way later. But we see a lot of dark in Tyrion, especially as his tribulations build up upon him, and he gets no respect for women, black. You know, we get a lot of that, especially later. We get a lot of the, instead of the more witty, jobby Tyrion, we get a very dark, spiteful little, you know, somebody who is mean for the sake of being mean.
Yeah, and
yeah, I don't think that he is mean for the sake of being mean. I think he's mean because he has a lot of self-loathing in him.
Yeah,
and he just, you know, takes it out on everyone. And his first target.
I mean, well, he displaces his anger. Like, if he sees somebody looking down their nose at him, or somebody who, you know, tells one of the same five dwarf jokes, he makes it his business to sniff out their weakness and
to use it against them.
Yes.
And so that's why, like, my own self, when it comes to Tyrion, I do like the fact that as far as the show is concerned, they really try to make him look like he's just like
likable. For sure.
They
attractive.
try to make him look more likable. They try to make him more relatable. But in a sense, like with the actual book version of Tyrion, you see that gray area of him. You see that he can actually be good, and he does take a fondness to Jon, and he actually does mentor him in a sense. And he is in Jon's corner. But then on the other hand, you do see Tyrion as he lashes out on other people and how he treats others. But in a sense, you also have that third level as well, as to how the people treat Tyrion. Like, if they treat Tyrion in a certain light, then he's going to turn around and he's going to right off of that, and then he's going to go just as dark, if not even darker, in order to confront people. But if you approach him in a different sense, then he won't turn around, and he won't have the same kind of arrogance like maybe someone like his sister. Regardless of how nice you try to be to Cersei, Cersei's just going to try to shove you as far down into the mud as she can, regardless. And she'll even take your kindness as a weakness to overcome and to overpower you, in a sense. And so with Tyrion, he doesn't do that. But then in a sense,
right. I agree with that. And what I'm talking about is when he's mean for the sake of being mean. Is particularly when we see him, he basically rapes the cheesemonger's servant. Of course, he was told he could have anybody, you know, any of the servants he wanted, but he only does it because she shows a severe distaste for if she would have to lie with him.
Yep,
and that's what I'm talking about. And some of the I'm really just ready for the new book and to see, you know, to get a little more of this.
Yes.
Yeah, I think everyone is waiting for the Winds of Winter. I mean, what fan isn't?
Which I know, right, Misha? What do you think we're gonna get it?
I don't think this year. No.
You don't think it would get it in this year? Okay. Anybody got a prediction?
Well, my whole thing is that depending upon how production goes, if they don't end up, because from what I understand, the book is already done. And so if they want to keep the momentum for this year going, either they're going to have to try to push for the last season of the show to air this year, even if it has to air somewhere later on, like later on in 2018. Either they push for the show to be pushed out sometime towards the end of the year, or they're going to push that book out, because if they don't and they completely leave 2018 wide open with no kind of content whatsoever for the fans, then in 2019 when they bring it back, they might not have the same kind of people won't end up being as excited because they've already had a year to cool down. And when you drop out of season and you don't have anything to fill that void, that's when people who are in the business, they start getting a little worried about if they can keep their fans engaged or not. So they're not going to let us go a whole year without any kind of something. They're going to either try to bring out a new series, or they're going to try to drop Winds of Winter, or they're going to try to push for the last season to come out when they as quickly as possible after production, of course, because it's kind of how all of that works out. So it would be stupid for them to completely leave 2018 without doing anything, because then that would just kill their momentum. And the show has a lot of momentum right now, and the books have a lot of momentum. So they're going to try to at least keep their people engaged into something until they're ready to drop all of everything else. But they're going to give us something.
Yeah,
All
maybe.
right. I hate to do this, but I have got to wrap it up because I have got to make a pecan pie for somebody.
Okay, then I understand. But let me say this one thing. The only part that really stood out to me was the Wolf's Wood and knowing that the dragons were named after gods. I thought that was a very interesting section, and I'm definitely going to be doing my research later on that.
I agree, Misha. I think that Wolf's Wood is going to come back up for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing as you gotta go, maybe we should just shut it down here.
Mm-hmm.
And let's go ahead and do our outros, and we need to also figure out who's gonna do next week.
What have we got coming up next week? I didn't even look ahead.
The Catelyn
Mm-hmm.
chapter when she's with Bran.
I definitely don't want her.
Okay.
I'll take her.
Oh, you do it, Shelly. Go ahead, Shelly.
Okay, Shelly.
Yeah.
You can have
Yeah, I'll turn around and I'll take Catelyn again, and I'll try to rip her a brand new butthole, and I do promise. Stay tuned, everyone.
It's easy to do.
Okay,
It's easy to do.
your outros.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll start real quick so that I can go get these kids because they're just driving me nuts. But my name is Shelly. I'm kind of, I won't plug any of my stuff right now because I'm doing an overhaul of a couple of my like on my Reiki and on my shirt business and whatever. But I will give a little shout out. I don't know if my daughter's still listening or not, but she was in the other room and she was listening in on our conversation on our stream. And she was so proud. She was like, "Oh, look, Mom, there you are. I can hear you and everything." So, yeah, so she was sitting down and she became one of our greatest little patrons tonight. So, yeah, love you. Love you, Nikki. I think that I don't know, both of them are kind of a little too quiet. So I'm actually going to jump off right now because I'm a little concerned. So,
all right, bye, Shelly.
Love you guys. Take care.
Later.
Okay. All right, I'm Jen. I'm Jennifer Wolverton on Facebook. I have a YouTube channel. It's called The Lady Wolverton's Den, but I'm not really doing anything right now on there at all. Right now, all I'm doing is binge watching The Crown, and I do this show with Misha and Lord of the Last Hearth, Tony Umber, and Shelly every week, and really enjoy that. And that's good enough for me. But if you want to friend me on Facebook, please go ahead. As long as you don't look like a porn site or something like that, I accept everybody.
Don't lie. You know you accepting porn sites. I'm Tony Umber on YouTube. Do gaming videos mostly with Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, and mine. If I'm live streaming, it's probably on somebody else's channel or with a group of people. So, yeah, you catch me I'm on Twitter all the time, real active on Twitter, talking shit. So, if you want to talk shit, come see me on Twitter. And thanks for having me, Misha, as always. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Tony, for your review tonight. You were great. You really were.
Yeah,
You
you
were
were.
really informative. Probably did the best job of all of us, and that's just my opinion.
Yeah, that
Uh,
outline was really good. I thought so too, Misha. I thought that was really well put together. And thank you for having me, Misha. I'm sorry I forgot to thank you earlier. I really appreciate everything you do for our chat and everything because it's really easy for me to just join the chat and participate. So thank you so much.
No, it's not a problem. It's no problem at all. I want to apologize one more time for not getting the stream up here yesterday, as per our normal time. But I just fell asleep on you, so I'm so sorry for that. But we will be coming back Thursday. Thursday for sure with Catlin 2, I believe, the second
Oh,
chapter.
yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much. Yeah. Look, I had a migraine all day yesterday. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if it's the change in pressure or what it was, but I had a really tough time yesterday as well. I felt bad, and that's why I didn't message you really or anything and bug you because I don't know. Maybe it was that super moon we just had.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe. But I want to say thank you to all of the people in the chat. Thank you so much. It was a very lively chat tonight. Thank you all for joining us and come back next Thursday for Catlin 2. Thank you all to my panel, and I will see you all, next week.
All
My
right.
name, my name is
Everybody have a great week.
yeah,
Later.
my
All
name is
right. Bye.
Houston, and I'm gone. Thank you so much, guys.